So do you have a proposed starting place
Oh gosh. I have a
chronologically?
proposal. Um okay. I already like thought like I want it, especially since this is being recorded. I wanted to say like one disclaimer first, just for everybody if somebody listens. Um the first thing that I wanted to say was that this story does include so many of my own personal memories and like things that happened to me, but it also includes things that I had seen of my friends and like other close people, like their memories. And I'm not trying to use somebody else's story to like spin this web of like something against their religion, because I know that a lot of them are still in this, and so I don't want to make it sound like I'm using somebody else's story to say they're stupid or they're in a dumb religion or anything. And so I feel like I want to use some things that I have also seen that have affected me to a degree that also just like contribute, I guess, to the experience overall, that it's just important for me to like shine light on the darkness that's happening, especially within like evangelical youth groups and stuff like that. So that's just the disclaimer that I wanted to say.
That's a fair disclaimer. Okay. That was probably good to throw out.
Mm.
Okay, good deal. Well, yeah, I think it's not going to come across that way.
Okay. I just, I want to make sure. I feel like, especially the topics and the type of people that like I come from, they always have a response to something that has to do negatively about my experience, So
That's fair. Yeah, no, I get that for sure. But no, I think especially after all the other stories told, man, like so many
yeah.
people go through this. It's so everybody's story is
Mm-hmm.
different, obviously, but the fact that the church has been failing is not new.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's kind of got their own twist and individualistic nature of it, but I mean, this is your story. It is what it is,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. So wherever you think we should start, or wherever makes the most sense to start.
I think starting from like slightly the beginning is like easiest. It's just a little bit difficult on where to figure out like where to start, because it's like a bunch of things and little like occurrences happen over time that collect. And even then, when I was young, like I didn't get a full picture. It's not like I was just dumped into like this toxic environment, obviously. Like I stayed there for so long. So I think that think so whenever I first like came into youth, because I went to this church for like practically all my life. And whenever I first went into like ninth grade, because youth group was separated into 9th through 12th, I immediately was like enamored by all of the like different people, the different groups and everything. Our youth group was extremely cliquish. Like there was all of the kids, predominantly like the seniors and juniors, who were like, they were almost like youth leaders themselves. And it was like their group, their like everybody wanted to be like them, because they had so much, like they had so many responsibilities, and they just seemed like the perfect like role model young Christians that we all of us babies should follow and stuff. So there was a huge thing of that. And then there was a lot of people who were like, clearly their parents just brought them there. And what's also funny is that in my youth group, the majority of people, like I'd say like 60% of the people were homeschooled. And then the other portions were like from close schools, which where the church was, it was like they were definitely like rich or in private school. And so I don't know. I feel like there was a bunch of like the people who we didn't really talk to, or that we didn't know, their parents dragged there, or they were poor, which is terrible, but that's just kind of how it was.
Yeah.
And so they kind of glorified these seniors and stuff who I looked up to, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they have their lives like together and everything. Obviously looking back at it now, I'm like, they were just as much babies as I was. And I just can't believe like, I ever thought about them like that. But I can remember that I think from the age of like 15, I'd say. So I was a sophomore. That was whenever I really started realizing that this youth group really glorified like testimonies of deliverance from especially the seniors as like a way to get the freshmen and sophomore and everybody to believe or like solidify their faith more. As in, like, I can remember seniors talking about how, I mean, I was 17 years old when I was a senior in high school. So it's like,
Oh wow.
there's not that much of an age difference.
Yeah.
And some of these seniors were like 17 to, I think some of them were turning 19, and obviously, but it's like, they're talking about deliverance from like sexual sin or depression, self-harm, partying, drugs, like all these things that like they were so foreign to me. And all of these things that's like, they're 17, 18 years old. Like if they're into those things, then it's like deliverance how? Like you've been into it for probably like a month or two.
Yeah.
Or it's like you've just been like, typically these type of testimonies are done by people who are like 24 or 25. That was the first thing that I noticed. And that was the thing that I had always like subconsciously known. Like it just felt like this is so weird. Like it kind of feels forced because these people are so young and saying that they're being delivered from like these like super kind of crazy and like abusive situations because they prayed the sinner's prayer and God came upon them. They were baptized and like suddenly all of a sudden, like they don't like have sexual sin anymore, or like they moved out of their boyfriend's apartment, or like, I don't know. So that's like the first, I guess, experience that I had with the youth group and the ministry as a whole, because I had always been on the worship team. My dad was on the worship team and I played intermittently like piano and vocals and stuff for other ages, like the fourth graders and stuff. And so I knew that I wanted to go into ministry soon. And so in order to go into ministry, I needed to become one of them. But the thing is, I didn't have anything. Like I didn't have a testimony. I didn't have anything to be delivered from. I knew that I had a lot of like issues, like self-confidence, self-image issues. I knew that I had a lot of insecurity and like weird situations, bad situations happening at home. But I never saw those as like, oh, but it's not an outright sin that I'm doing that I have to be delivered from. So like, I don't know. I'm not going to be as valid as like a Christian or whatever as these kids who are being delivered. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So did that put your perspective of Christianity in any weird spot? Meaning like watching all this deliverance from things that most young people, like surely some young people like myself, I was incarcerated before I was 18. So there are like there are weird cases, but it's definitely not the norm. And when you go into like a normal youth group, it's not going to be half. It's not even going to be like a quarter. It might be like one kid.
And especially the demographic of our youth group. Like we were a bunch of sheltered, not rich, but definitely okay, like pretty well off kids who didn't know anything, you know?
So did it put a damper on your view of Christianity, or did it just put a damper on your view of those kids?
See, it's so weird because I can remember since I first like gained sentience, like I had always like believed in Jesus, and I'd always believed, like I always prayed. I can remember like praying in my bedroom all the time. Like my dad got me this little like kids Bible, and like I always had something in me that was like, well, no matter what happens, no matter what, I'm always going to believe in God, because it's like Jesus, like how can I ever not believe, basically? Like it doesn't matter what anybody else does, like, because my dad would always warn me, once you go to college, like you're going to get educated and they're going to brainwash you and you're going to lose your belief. And I was like, oh no, you don't have to worry about that. Like that's never going to happen to me, you know? So I already had that. I think that it was more of like it wasn't like, oh, Christianity, this is kind of like wishy-washy, because I didn't really have that self-awareness yet. It was more like, well, maybe like in order to get a testimony, I have to go through things first, or I have to do something. So it was more of like, Christianity isn't the problem, God isn't the problem, these people aren't the problem, like I'm the problem. which
Okay.
is such a weird thing to say because typically people are like, oh, I'm the problem because I'm not perfect enough. I'm not good enough. I do all these bad things. But it was like the reverse for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a little bit twisted for sure. But I
Hmm.
mean, as a kid, it's understandable. It doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
but as a kid, it made sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's understandable. Okay, so what happens next? I mean, you have a desire to go into ministry. You don't know how you fit.
So eventually we get a new like worship leader. By worship leader, I mean some guy in college. And like looking back on it, he was really young, but I thought that he was so old and like so cool and like hipster and everything that I wanted to be and more. And he was so
Uh-oh.
nice. He was like one of us. And whenever I said that I wanted to be on the worship team, he was like, yeah, totally. Do you know how to work this keyboard that hooks up to my computer? And I was like, yeah. So he's like, all right, you got it. Let's practice. And so I was like, okay. So it's super easy for me to like get in. And whenever I started hanging out with the worship team more, especially that youth leader, man, I honestly really loved it. I really liked the worship team. Like whenever it was just us, it was super chill. It felt like just a bunch of like kids hanging out and practicing their worship music. I don't know. It was really cool. But on Sundays, because we would practice after church on Sundays and sometimes on Wednesday, but like on Sunday mornings when everybody was there, it was like completely different. It brought in this like sense of like, well, yeah, I'm a youth, but like we're all on stage. We're all playing music. So we're like better than all the other youth. That was like the
Mm,
attitude kind of some of the people on the worship team.
yeah.
And they were like, well, I mean, just what I was talking about before. Well, I used to do all these things, but now I don't because God saved me. And so now I'm on stage because I'm so great. And
Uh,
um, so we started getting into stuff like that. And it's not that I was super sheltered. It's just, I didn't really have like, I was very content. I was content with like a lot of really innocent, like fun child things. Like I wasn't out to look for sexual sin or partying or drinking or drugs. Like I wasn't like, I don't know. I just didn't really have any interest in it. And so whenever I consistently heard like these testimonies and stuff, I'm like, okay, well, what is that? Or like, well, if they're doing it, like I wonder what that feels like. Like if they do all these things, they probably have such a deeper, closer relationship to God because like God saved them and like God didn't really save me. I mean, I pray, but like he doesn't talk to me like he talks to them. Like I don't hear him, I don't feel him. So it came to like I don't know. I mean also during sophomore year I started dating my boyfriend too, which we met outside of church and I actually started bringing him to my church. And so we became the like token couple essentially in youth because we were the only ones who stayed together for longer than 6 months. Not only
yeah.
6 months, but I mean like this summer we'll have been married for 5 years too. So it's like
That's crazy.
um
Yeah.
yeah, so we were like the model couple. Everybody looked up to us because the youth leaders were so anti dating. Like, oh,
Hmm.
dating sucks. Like boys are stupid or girls are dumb. Like you don't need that. We're so cool. Like we need Jesus. Like dating is stupid. Oh, except for like this token couple. Like if you're gonna date, it has to look like them.
Wow.
Except the problem is after hearing all of these testimonies and it being right there and me not even being prepared for being in situations like we were definitely not the model like couple that they were explaining. And it's like I don't have anything like I'm not saying anything whether or not the fully 100% pure like never having kissed before wedding. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm just saying we are definitely lying. Like
Yeah.
we're definitely not following their model couple thing. And so for me personally now, the fact that we didn't wait until we were married isn't the problem. I think that the whole issue and what makes me feel gross is that like we were lying to all these other kids, even as we came to be like seniors and youth leaders ourselves. And that's, I don't know.
No, I mean, I get that. I definitely get that. Why you'd have that feeling for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Did
And
any of the
so
kids know that you guys weren't perfect, or was everybody kind of on that same mental track?
Definitely not. Me and my husband, boyfriend at the time, we're not, I don't know, we're not awkward, but like all of our lives, it's been drilled into us that this stuff is so evil that it literally, like, even deep into our marriage, it's difficult for us to even hold hands in public. Like, we don't want to hold
Wow.
hands in public. We definitely don't like kissing each other in public. Like, I think I think our closest friend saw us kiss once before we got married, and after getting married, I mean, people saw us kiss when we got married, but like, people, even our families, probably have seen us kiss maybe once or twice since then. Like, we
Whoa.
don't. I know we don't like this whole purity culture thing, like about like you can't do anything until you're married, but once you're married, you can do everything like abhorrent in front of God's eyes or whatever. We can't just flip a switch like that. Like, so
Interesting.
nobody knew. Nobody knew that we had been doing anything at all because we can't even be like a normal couple in front of people without feeling like guilty or awkward or weird or, you know?
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Very interesting. So I mean, that's a damage right there. That's obviously a
Yeah.
trauma that's lasted.
Hmm.
That's wild. Wow. Okay. God, man, that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy. That did a real number on you guys. Is that something
I
you
know.
guys have a desire to change, or is that kind of like, do you agree with it at this point?
Um, I think a portion of it is that my husband, his parents were never super like physical with each other. They
Mm,
never really like kissed or hugged. And it's not even in a negative thing. Like his family just vibes a lot different than mine. Mine is super physical. My personality with it definitely was from a part of like shame. Like I wasn't allowed to for so long
yeah.
that I'm trying to undo the like whatever,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
rules, I guess.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. All right. So you guys are the token couple.
Yeah.
What comes next?
Um, so junior year is kind of terrible. I don't know what else to say about it. It's kind of not good. Uh, During this year, we actually like break up for 10 months. And I think it's because in my head, I'm going, oh my gosh, we're not the token couple. And besides, he has like, I mean, we're growing. We're 16 and 17, and 16 and 17-year-olds have like perfect relationships. So we're fighting a lot, and he doesn't really get along with my friends that well right now. And like, I don't know. So we break up for like 10 months, I think. Really, I just stopped talking to him and he texts me back and I don't respond. So it's kind of like I'm just ghosting him. I don't even try to break it off, whatever.
Yeah.
But during this time is when a lot of, I mean, I was going to say questionable, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot worse than just questionable things happen. So the um, first thing that starts happening is me and one of my friends, I guess. So this portion I do. Okay, I feel like this is starting off with a bang, kind of. Uh, this kind of, personally, this kind of does involve things from my childhood, just to get my point of view in this situation. Um, but I'll say that like in a second. I have like a close friend in youth, and she's in her own relationship or whatever, and he's like not a Christian, not like she just met him at her school. And she always talks about how he tries to pressure her into having sex, but like she's so good and she always says no and like whatever. And they've been together for like 2 years. And so I tell her, I'm like, you do know he's cheating on you. Like there's no way he's dating you for 2 years, not cheating on you. Like there's no way. She gets so mad at me about it all the time or whatever. But I can remember how she starts like sleeping over at my house or I start sleeping over at hers, and like at church versus at our houses, she's like completely different. So at our
Uh,
houses, she would like at night, like we would just be like sleeping or whatever, and she would start like touching me or trying to take off my clothes, or, like kissing me. And she would always say, like, don't be lame, like, just cuddle with me or whatever. And I would just be
Wow.
like, oh, this is kind of weird. I don't know. Like that's not really how this works. But then on Sundays and Wednesdays, like I would just stand next to her, go and sit down with a group of her friends, and she would make a huge deal about it, saying like you're gross. Why are you trying to hold my hand? Or why are you trying to kiss me? Or like
Wow.
whatever. And so she would do that stuff. And I would be like,
Wow.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to hang out with people. And she was like, and you're also like trying to get me to break up with my boyfriend. Like, what's wrong with you? Are you like gay or something?
Oh, wow.
And so the youth leaders actually came and talked to me, and I would have meetings with them, not frequently, but like at least once a month about like accountability. Like, how am I doing? Like, are you and your friend like okay? And like they were making sure that I wasn't acting on my like same sex whatever. And first of all, I'm not gay at all. Like I'm not. So they were trying to convince me basically like, well you're doing all these things, so it's like you're always close to her, so it's like if you're dealing with this you can tell us. And I'm like, I'm not. And they're like, it's okay if you do, like you just need to pray. And so that was a whole situation that like
Wow.
they were convincing me that I was like at not straight, not super straight. And so I was like, I swear I don't know. And so finally I start questioning myself. I'm like, well, if all this is happening and I'm like okay with it, maybe I am. I don't know. Like maybe whatever. And also, this isn't the first time that I've had a situation like this with a friend. Like when I was like 5, my close friend did something similar. And then when I was 9, another best friend started doing something similar. So I already had this point of view of like, oh, well, this is like how best friendships are sometimes. Like, you know, like that's why we're called best friends, not just friends.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that starts happening in junior high. I mean, not junior year. It starts happening in junior year. And a lot of other things like that start happening, as in like, I mean, come on, it's like high school and my youth group is the worst at gossip and everything like that. Okay, wait, I was gonna go on to another thing. I don't know if you had something else to say or ask or what.
No, go. Just keep rolling.
Okay. So, okay. Oh yeah. So summer camps. I feel like this is a good transition. Summer camps we have like a pretty fairly big youth group. I don't know how big youth groups are supposed to be. Ours are like 100 to 200 or whatever, for especially during summer. And we went on like summer retreats a lot, and they were like a huge thing because we always went to the best retreats for like 6 days. All of us were shoved in like just a couple cabins, and we had like 2 hours of sleep. You know, I have a lot against summer camps for kids of any age now, just because of the amount of emotional and spiritual manipulation that go on.
Yeah.
But it left so much room for like, because we had like, I think we had like 2 or 3 hours a day of just doing nothing. Especially like some years were different. Some years we had like barely any time. Some years we had a lot. I don't even know. But one year, I think it was either sophomore or junior. I don't remember. There was just so much gossiping happening, and so much like a guy and a girl go off for like an hour and then come back, and we're like, where did you go? Like things like that happening. Yeah. And there was like me and my friend, and then our 2 guy friends or whatever were together all the time, and it was like whatever. It was fun. I mean, we never got up into anything, especially like us 4, like we were super chill, whatever. Like we didn't like what my youth leaders would say is purpling, because boy and girl, pink, blue, whatever. Purpling is going off together with the opposite sex.
Oh, wow.
And like we would like be so against it. We thought it was gross. But there'd be so many rumors about us doing like crazy things off wherever. So we would come back and people would treat us terribly, especially since like my boyfriend was there too, and he like he's really into sports, and so he would be with the other guys who play sports, and me and my friends are absolutely not. into that stuff. So we didn't really spend that much time together on summer camps. And so it was like they would like spread rumors about us, and people would treat us so weird and terribly. And it's like, that's not like an outright terrible thing, but at a summer retreat, especially a Christian summer retreat, it like made me feel disgusting, and it made me feel really uncomfortable and weird. And it was all like psychological, like I don't know, bullying, I guess, psychological bullying type of things. And so I would tell the youth leaders, and they're like, oh, it's just whatever. It's just funny. It's silly. Like, you know, boys will be boys, stuff like that. But then all the girls, like, we would get in trouble if we ever like went and purpled or whatever. So that's a little bit more of like the, I guess, gender, sex type of issues that happened. But also at summer retreats, the youth leaders didn't really care about like hazing and initiation and like pranks and stuff like that, which happened frequently. And I think I talked about it a little bit before. I'm not going to put that specific. I don't want to put that specific story in this one.
I remember.
But there, I think, so the summer retreat, like that would happen all the time. And the youth leaders would just not bat an eye. They'd be like, oh yeah, like it's just silly. But like if it costs them money or something, and then the parents find out, it's bad if the parents find out. They would also allow, like, we would do these stupid things where we would make like concoctions, like put all this food or all this weird stuff. Some of it would be bugs or like spoiled food or something together. And then like you would have to drink it or do something else, where people would like get super sick, and they were like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. It's just silly. But it's like, we had to sign this whole document, like this whole like consent form where like if we got hurt or sick in any way, like it's like not their fault, or I don't know. And so they were just allowing people to do this. And we had constant like hospital trips and stuff like that.
Wow.
But
and this was through a church? Like this was a church organization summer camp?
It was like, it's like the camps that we went to were Christian camps, but like our church isn't affiliated with it.
Okay.
Like we went and like had a week there, like the church paid to like use the camp or something. It's like one of those.
Yeah. Okay. God. Yeah, I mean, to a degree, like all of this is normal kid stuff, but it should. I guess that's the problem. Is like you said, it's Christian. It should look different. It should look different.
Yeah, it's so hard. Like I've always went back and forth with this, because it's like I'll gaslight myself saying, "Oh, this is super normal. It's not that big of a deal." But there's the whole mental manipulation about it. That's like, but we're Christians, so we're held to a higher standard, so we're allowed to do this, but you're not, and you're the bad guy, and you need to repent, like that type of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes it like if you strip the Christian off the label, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
And there's something wrong with that. So yeah, I mean, on one hand, like it's normal, but the whole idea is that we're not supposed to be normal. That's like that's a problem. Normal is it's lukewarm.
Yeah, and so like I would go crazy because a lot of these things were out of my control, except I'm the sinner in this situation and it's my problem, so I need to repent. But I'm like, I didn't even ask for any of this. I didn't even try. I don't know what I'm supposed to be repenting of. But then I was like, oh, right, testimonies, deliverance. Like, you know, it's whatever. I'll repent and then God will love me more or something like that. I don't know. The next thing. So around the same time, like sophomore to junior year is like obviously the most hectic time, clearly. But I think I said this before. But I was going to talk about this youth leader, because I feel like this youth leader, a lot of youth leaders are like, and I don't know. I wanted to talk about it more. So one of my friends who did get pregnant in high school comes to our church. And I say hi to her. I greet her and everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, hi. Like, I didn't know she was coming. And it was before service. And our youth leader comes over and was like, hey, so like, we're glad that you're visiting, but you're like clearly pregnant and that's such a bad influence for the kids. So like, could you leave? And she like
Wow.
basically asked her to leave and like not come back. And I was like, this is uncomfortable. But in a way, I agreed with her, like the youth leader, out of my like full indoctrination. I was like, I mean, yeah, like we can't really promote that. But then I was like, how can you just kick someone out of church? Like everybody's supposed to come at, like literally the church's slogan was come as you are.
Yep.
And you're rejecting them. What is
Yep.
that about?
Yep.
And
No.
so, yeah, this is the same youth leader who, whenever I told her like I dealt with a really bad eating disorder and like body dysmorphia and stuff, she told me that, well, you're just being selfish. You're thinking of yourself too much. You're being prideful and you just need to pray harder. And if you're like dealing with all these things, in fact, then you don't have a good relationship with God. And like you need to pray and read a little bit more, pray a little bit harder. Like for some reason, God just isn't like, why isn't this working? Like, what did you do essentially? But she also had the same problem that I did. And she said that she suffered with it for 12 years. And I also forgot to say, like, she also was the leader who had like a baby in high school. So it's like she's literally condemning us for doing the same things that she did. So I'm like,
Whoa.
how, if you know what it's like to deal with these things at this age, then how in the world are you making it worse? Like what is your thoughts process? Shaming someone to God doesn't work. Okay.
Wow.
Like I have tried to, like, people have been trying to shame me to believe in God and believe in Jesus for all my life. So tell me why I only found him when it was just me all by myself, when all those people left.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. No, that's the Calvinist way. That's
yeah.
crazy. That is hypocrisy at its best. That's a stereotypical non-believer image of Christians. Absolute
Hmm.
hypocrites. That's crazy. God. How not self-aware you can be.
I know.
Wow. Wow,
And
wow, wow.
so I had like, I mean, a lot of the things that I saw and perceived like at church. I mean, as most kids, you see things through your past experience. And my experience at the house, at my own in my own home. Oh my gosh, my past experience in my own home just was not good. But it's not. It. I don't know. See, I'm really good at telling myself what it like. I'm really good at gaslighting myself. It wasn't good, but it wasn't like a lot of people's. And with like I would be treated at my house like I was never allowed to deal with like mental health issues because those were for kids who actually had a bad childhood. Like my parents literally told me that essentially word for word. I was
Wow.
constantly told like you're just so like naturally evil. You're just so naturally terrible. Like it just comes out of you so easily. Like you
Whoa.
are so evil. But the context in which those things were told me are like I have extremely bad body dysmorphia. And so whenever I was trying to like get ready in the morning before church one morning, I couldn't find like clothes that like, I don't know, I just felt terrible and everything. I was like crying in the mirror. I was upset. I guess I had an attitude. And that was my parents' like response because I was like making them late for church,
That you have
essentially.
evil within you.
Yeah, because I'm just so mean to everybody all the time. Like my mom was just telling me that we're late, that we have to go, and I was like, I like apparently lashed out at her. And I'm just so naturally evil, it just naturally comes out of you. And I'm like, I'm literally suffering. Like I don't
Oh
know.
my
Like you think
God.
like I chose to feel like this? You think I choose to be like this?
Yeah.
Like especially like the feelings that I would have toward myself, they would make me so mad that the only way to get them out is lashing out at other people. But it's like, why would I ever want to do that? I can vividly remember, especially like when I got older, especially in college, like I was such an angry, mean person all the time because of the way that I inherently felt about myself, like inside. And that
Yeah.
was the only way to release like the pent up energy. And so people would be like, "You're just so naturally evil," and I'm like, I don't want to feel like this. Like
No.
I do not choose to act like this. I am so guilty and I'm so sorry. But like, I don't want to say sorry because you're the mean one who's trying to make me be I feel like the victim here, but I know it's my fault. And, it's just going back and forth all
Yeah,
the time
that's a
within
vicious
yourself.
circle for sure. Total vicious
Mhm.
circle. And I mean, you're being reactive. You're not being
Yeah.
evil. You're
Hmm.
dealing with some stuff and then you don't have an outlet or you don't know how to deal with it. And I mean, that comes out. That's a very normal behavior. Not that it's right.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, you're aware like it's not the right move. But then, I mean, if people attack you for it, it's really hard. I get what you're saying. It becomes really hard to like take responsibility and be like, you're right,
Yeah.
this is my fault. Because now you're being an ass too. So now I feel somewhat justified in being an ass to you in the first place. That's tough. That's
Yeah.
tough. Do you feel like you always had that? Like that started as a young kid?
Yeah, definitely. I think like the specific like self-image problems started happening when I was like 9 or 10. But I had like a lot of like I didn't trust myself and I was always scared to do things since I was like 4 or 5 just because every time I tried to do something it like my parents would act like it wasn't the right way or like they would constantly say like well, if you don't get 100%, then I know you didn't do your best because your best is 100%. And so I would feel guilty and I would be really upset at myself for not doing well at school, like not getting 100% because I'm like, well, that's my best. So why am I like, I'm trying as hard as I can and I can't do these things. So that type of like self-doubt, like I guess morphed into self-image problems, of course, mixed with like getting into like 4th, 5th grade, like a lot of bullying and stuff like that. So everything just kind of like congealed into that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So do you attribute most of it to your home environment, or do you think some of it is biological, or I guess what are your thoughts on the source?
Um, hmm. I do think a lot of it is my home environment, but then also like I don't know, there's so many influences nowadays, especially because I had access to the internet at a really young age.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot about like just that type of topic online that I don't know if that would have been natural. I don't know if that would have been something that happened so early on, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay. Man. Do you still feel that way? Like you're reactive?
This this is a huge thing that I like that convinces me that I hadn't been saved until February because I had been in such violently terrible depression, anxiety, and anger, specifically for the past 3 years, like ever since I was taken from the church. Like I I have been such a terrible person. Like I can't even put into words all the things that have happened and how I felt. Like it feels, I'm not even joking when I say it felt like an evil spirit of anger or something like grabbed me by the throat and like I would just start spewing all these things to my husband or something that I didn't even mean, but I couldn't control. Like I was just so angry that I wanted to tear the world apart. Like I was
Mm.
like all these things, like I felt like that so violently. And then suddenly in February was whenever like I started praying again and I had this huge like I don't know, discussion to God, like what the church would call being saved that happened. And I'm not even joking when I say in an instant, 100% of my anger and my depression and anxiety were gone. Like I have literally not felt a bout of anger. I haven't been depressed. I've been stressed out, but not the same anxiety that I felt. And it's so weird because I dealt specifically with like depression and anxiety my entire life. And so
Yeah.
for them to just go away because of this, I'm like, were these like like demonic spirits of like depression and anxiety and anger and stuff like that I've been dealing with? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's like a huge thing that's like, oh my gosh, like this is so much more real than like any church can convince me of because like I tried to feel the way that I do now for the past like 10 years. So like why couldn't the church give it to me now? But like, I don't know.
And so February,
Mhm.
explain exactly what happened.
Okay.
With as little detail as you need, but give a general picture of what was so life-changing.
So it was at the beginning of this. Okay. I don't even know how. I feel like I need to say a lot. So after church, I mean, before we even left church, my mind's like, I mentally checked out. So my mind was wandering. I was going into like, I guess, new age type of beliefs and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And I kind of grew in that direction for 3 years straight. And I interacted directly with, oh my gosh, that's such a bold sentence. I interacted with what felt to be like a lot of like demonic forces a lot of the time
Yeah.
because people would say like, oh, like you have to pray to your ancestors, pray to the universe,
Mhm.
manifest, like all of these things. And it's like now looking
Mhm.
back on it, I was legitimately asking for like demons to come into my life. And I
Yeah.
think that they literally manifest as this anxiety, depression, and anger and stuff like that. So with the turn of the new year, I could remember writing down like there's so many like superstitious things. And one of them was like, on New Year's Eve, you write down, like you manifest how you exactly want your year to go. So I was like writing down all these manifestations, and a lot of them were like, I want to stop feeling so anxious. I want to stop feeling so depressed. I want to have direction in life. I want purpose. I want all these things. And I think that that anxiety from that moment kept growing because I started getting absolutely absorbed by TikTok. And on
Mhm.
TikTok, especially at the beginning of this year, dude, why was everybody thinking the world was ending?
Yep.
Like, there was all of the things about like that rapture is happening soon. Like, you have to repent, or like World War III is going to happen. The nukes are going to be dropped. And I was just like a ball of fear and anxiety. Okay. So that manifestation did not work. I was so anxious. And I was like constantly like to my husband, I was like, oh, I don't understand. Like, do you think it's going to happen? Like, what's going to, like, I always like, if I'm scared about something, I'll ask somebody like, well, what do you think is going to happen logically? What do you think is going to happen? And he's like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, that doesn't help. You have to tell me, do you think it's going to happen or not? And it would just spin like that.
Oh
And
God.
so I'm like in that mindset. And then while I'm scrolling on TikTok, actually, it's like sometimes I'll just scroll through social media mindlessly, like I'm staring through the screen. And suddenly I just felt like deep in my soul, like just a, like I just felt go get your Bible. Like it was almost audible. I was like, what the heck? Like I haven't read in like over 3 years. I'm not gonna do that. But it just kept happening, like, go get your Bible. So I grabbed it. I sat on the floor, I put it in front of me and I stared at it. And so I sat there in silence and I was just like, okay, God, I know I'm not supposed to. Well, first of all, I was like, okay, I'm sorry, I haven't prayed in like a while. Please don't be mad about me. Mad at me about that. But okay. So I was like, I know that I've been told in the past that I'm not supposed to just turn to a random book and read. I have no idea where to read. And before I even like stopped the thought, like it was just like I just felt this like just open it. So I was like, okay, I just grab it and open it, and it was like my hand deliberately knew where to turn, and like I turned to Job. I turned to the last
Yes.
couple chapters where Job is asking God, like, why is all this happening? It doesn't make sense. And God is essentially telling him, like, well, you have no power over the earthquakes. You have no power over the wild beasts that I have created. Why do you think you have power over me? Why do you think
Mhm.
you have any foreseeable authority to understand or have the knowledge that I've kept for myself? And like, I'm not like, if you want to know something, I'll let you know when you're ready. Like, I'm not, it's essentially that whole story.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my goodness, because I had never read the book of Job. Like I knew the story, but like I never read it. Like I studied it, like I heard it in church and stuff. And for me to like just turn to that, like I am so, so cautious. Like, what is it? Skeptical of like the spiritual things, like speaking in tongues and prophecy and all that stuff. Like
Mhm.
I don't know. I just my experience had always been like people forcing it. But in that moment, suddenly, like I literally was like, this was not me. Like I know that it wasn't my intuition because I don't know just to turn. Like was a brand new Bible that my dad got for me that Christmas. So I hadn't even read it, a word in it. I didn't know where to turn. And so my hand just like turned there and I read all that. And I was just like shaking. Like, I don't know what it was. Like, it was just a deep, like deep inside. Like, it felt like I was just like stabbed with an EpiPen. I was shaking so violently. And I literally just start praying and I'm writing down my prayer. I actually have my book that I've been like journaling in on and off for the past 2 years. I just started like praying and writing down my prayer. And it was essentially like, I don't know what happened. I can't remember what I really said. I just knew that like it was basically me thanking God for like, I guess talking to me because I mean up until this point, like especially at church, like I had never like it's so close to audible, but it's not audible. Like it's a deep intuition. Like I had never had
Yeah.
that feeling from God before. And so for it to be so like I 100,000, like I know percent, like 100% know that it was like God. Like it's not like my intuition, like or whatever. Like so I was just thanking him for like talking to me. And then I just wrote like a huge thing of repentance. And then I wrote like a huge prayer of like asking for him to just like please, like all of a sudden I just felt so aware of the darkness and like the heaviness in my house that I was like, oh my gosh, like Holy Spirit, please, you have to come in this house right now. Like I feel like I'm gonna die. Like you have to get rid of it, like take it all out. And so I just started like praying essentially prayers like that. And then I start turning again and I turn to Psalms. I think it was like Psalm 91, or I don't know. It was some sort of Psalms, but it was like a bunch of prayers of like God being the shield and God being our protection and our guider and our provider and like or our guide, stuff like that. And I just start praying those Psalms as well. And like that day, I literally prayed like I think in that moment I prayed for like 4 hours or something, and it was just thankfulness and then repentance and then protection. And then I prayed over my entire house for so long. And I actually like I felt the need to like anoint my house with oil and stuff like that. And like literally ever since then, 100% of like the dark or like evil presences or like any kind of depression, anxiety, anger, everything has been like absolutely gone. Like me and my husband, our relationship has been like the best it's ever been, even before we got married. So
Wow. Okay. So a couple questions. One,
yes.
how will you feel? What will you do? How will you react if any of those old feelings come back? Because let's say for even strong, people who are strong in their faith and have a good connection with God, I think what you experience, you're right about. I think a lot of the anxiety, the depression, I think these things were, call them attachments that have some kind of demonic energy behind them. But I feel like people experience those things to varying degrees, sometimes when they're not, or maybe they're just weak attachments or whatever it may be. What if it comes back? Whether it's severe again, like it was before, whether it's very tenuous and kind of easy to snap out of, but what if you experience those feelings again? What will that do to your faith? What will that make you think about the experience where you're in now, where it's gone? How do you think you deal with that? Just out of curiosity.
So to the degree and frequency that I felt these things, like more months, like there were less months or less days and months that I did not feel that way at all. And so I would be the first thing that I would think about is like what is my like my physiology? What is my body doing? What are my hormones doing? Because I'm like really into like holistic nutrition and fitness and all that stuff. I'm kind of a nerd about that. But I would first be saying, okay, what did I eat? What have I been eating? Because I kind of have food intolerances. I'd be thinking like, okay, how are my hormones out of balance? Is my sleep weird? Like I would try to figure that out. And if I'm doing everything right, which I absolutely have not been since February, I would then be like, okay, why? There has to be like a tangible reason why. Like if something in my life, like maybe I have some sort of anxiety because I didn't get something done, because I always forget something done. I don't know. But in the end, I know that I would turn to God and be like, I don't know. I just like, I 1000% know that like God is real. I don't know if this is so weird because back when I was a kid, I knew God was real. But it's like now I know that God is real because he's talked to me and he has literally taken this like evilness out of my life, that it's like what other reason would I have? Like what other thing would I believe in? Like who else would have made this happen? So it's like, since I know that God is real and everything, like I would pray to him and be like, okay, well, I'm feeling this way for a reason. Maybe I don't know what it is, but like I feel like I would still have faith. Like literally yesterday, for a tiny split second, I had a feeling of like like that sinking feeling that you get whenever you first get depressed, like,
Hmm.
oh, there is no hope, there's no point, there's no purpose. Like for a tiny second I did, and then I was like, oh wait, like God, like I don't know why I'm feeling like this. And then all of a sudden he gave me motivation, and I started like cleaning up my house, and I started like, I don't know, being a good housewife. No, I'm just kidding. But like I started, I don't know, I just like, yeah, I would like, I don't know, I guess go to God, which is such a stupid cliche thing, but like especially yesterday, like he has given me like purpose and like meaningless things, which sounds so stupid. And I really judged people for saying that before, but like now that I'm saying it, it's kind of pissing me off. So, okay.
No, I talk with Kat about that all the time. So because it annoys the hell out of me too, that there's a lot of cliches that I feel like have been abused. And so now when they're used, you just sound stupid to yourself.
Yeah.
But the statement is absolutely true. And it's hard to like rewire that, because I say similar stuff. And when I say it, I feel like just a total idiot, especially when I say it like to my spouse. I'm like, man, I feel
Yeah.
really stupid saying that. But I mean it very literally. I mean, like the words for what their definitions are, I mean that. I don't mean like the cliche. But real quick. So when you were a kid, you knew God existed. You said that. And you said now you know God exists. And you know now because the experience has been more tangible, I guess is the word that I would use. You felt it more. You even almost audibly heard it, which I get, because that's kind of when I talk about the way you can differentiate kind of like the spirit working with you
Hmm.
in contrast to your conscience. Like your conscience to me is a quiet voice, and it's not very
Yeah.
audible. It's more like feeling. But my experience with God is like it's very similar to the conscience, but it's like super heavy, to the point that you said it well.
Hmm.
I like the way that you said it. It's like it's almost loudly audible, but like not literally audible. And
Yeah.
I agree with that. I feel like that's been kind of my experience too. So when you were a kid though, because like my daughter's 6, and I obviously teach her about my faith, and she knows what I do, and we read every night and read the Bible and read other stories, and we pray together and do devotionals and stuff. So like she believes in God, but she believes in God out of ignorance. If I'm being honest, like
Yeah.
she's 6, she doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
She believes whatever I tell her. So do you think any of your childhood belief in God was just out of ignorance, or do you feel like you really believed it because you kind of understood the concept, or was it a mixture of it?
I think that it was a mix,
Okay.
but predominantly it was like just surface level. Like,
Hmm.
oh, I do bad things, God saves us
Yeah.
from like evil, basically. That made sense to me. And obviously all of the nuance and weird stuff was what like about that situation was what pulled me away like
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
But it was a mix of that, and then also seeing how like, I mean, back then when I was super young, my parents were a lot closer to God and more, as I would say, in quote, straight up God and the spirit and stuff, because they used to pray like the spirit over me and like my sibling and stuff, and like they used to pray like that, but like now it's like completely different. But I think that it was seeing them have that, and like that child, like, oh, like, my parents, like everything they say is right, and especially if they feel something so deeply, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also think like now seeing kids and like some things I've seen on TikTok. See, I'm not on the bad side of TikTok anymore. I'm on the like, I don't know, like tips and tricks TikTok. I don't know, whatever. But this one TikTok came up of like this woman asking questions like, do you think that like babies like pray and can hear God and talk to God because they're so pure? Like as we grow up, do you think we get further away from God? So like, what if there's like an innate, like, I don't know, just an innate little like childlike faith like towards God that we like, I guess, grow out of? Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand the concept. What do you think about that? I have thoughts about that.
I don't know. Because kids are assholes. And so
Agreed. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what I think about that. Um, I think perhaps as babies, like I'm talking like baby, like less than 1 years old, probably.
Yeah.
But after that, it's like, I don't know. I don't know much.
How would that prayer look? Because to me, prayer is a conscious thing. I don't believe you can. I mean,
Yeah.
you can unconsciously be connected to God, I suppose, but you're removing free will from it because you have to have
Yeah.
consciousness to willfully do something. So I don't know. I think that's
I
a tough
kind of
question.
I kind of compare it to like imagine being in like you are well fed, you are in the most comfortable bed ever. You're like with your spouse or whatever, and you're just talking, and you have that sense of the most content, comfortable, like happiness or whatever with
Yeah,
that person. Like I feel like that's the type of prayer. Like it's not like you don't put words to it. It's like a feeling. Like that's how I would imagine babies pray or like commune with God.
that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I would think that's peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's peace. And to me, maybe it's just because I'm cynical and maybe it's just because I'm the type of thinker that I am. But that peace is in a baby's context to me is ignorance because there's no
Yeah.
corruption of the world yet. Your parents haven't really had enough time to do any real damage to you yet. You're you're blank. You're like a blank slate. I do believe that babies in some way are like connected to God, and to me there's a slight connection to like when people ask about, well, what happens when a baby dies, right? Because a baby's not
Yeah.
saved necessarily. Well, a baby is pure. A baby hasn't done anything yet. I don't think God is that much of an ass to just send
Yeah.
babies to hell whenever they die. So I think some of that is like the purity of it, but I don't know. I have a hard time with that, but I think it is just because I'm very cynical and I'm very like thought
I
process
also do
oriented.
think, yeah, I also do think that type of ignorance is good too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, most kids that I've ever known, when they're young and they haven't been to school yet and they haven't been around other kids and they have good parents who are loving, they're really good kids. And then the minute they start going to
Yeah.
school and they interact with the world or they go to daycare and interact with the world, other kids who maybe have brothers and sisters who suck, or maybe have parents who suck, that's
Yeah.
totally anecdotal, but I've always experienced kids to remain pure, even when they're 2, 3, 4, 5. My kid was the sweet, she could never do any wrong until she started going to school. And I can see the influence from the other kids. But before
Hmm.
that, like my kid was never in trouble, really. Like every once in a while, she'd get an attitude or something, but she'd immediately come down when I talked to her. So I think kids do keep the pure. To me, it's a world thing, man. Like everything to me goes out to the world. The minute a human at any age has too much interaction with the world, and sadly, you're a good example that it doesn't need to be unbelieving world. That even if a kid goes to church world and youth group world and summer camp world, but those kids are corrupt, or that system is corrupt, or those leaders are corrupt, the kid is still going to be corrupted in one way or another, which is a pity because those should kind of be like safe spaces where you get a break from the unbelieving world that doesn't agree with your morals and your values and stuff like that, where you can still find some kind of purity. But from your experience, just yourself, you didn't have that experience. You met corruption pretty much right away within the Christian
Yeah.
context, which is sad. It's sad.
Hmm.
Interesting. That baby thing, that's an interesting question. I've never really thought about that. Babies praying.
I know.
Okay. Where were we?
I just talked about my whole coming to the spirit thing.
Yes, your
I think,
February. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
my February. What else do I call
Your
that?
February fiasco. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've never had any experience like that prior.
No.
So for you, it's always kind of been, as a child, a mix of ignorance and what your parents taught you about who God was and the whole context of Christianity. As you went through like grade school, high school, do you feel like it turned into
I
more of a conscious belief?
okay, this I don't know
Okay.
because went to like a in between church. Like we weren't really charismatic, but we weren't really like Baptist, I guess.
Yeah.
Like our I think our worship and our like the emotional manipulation that went on during church really, like especially worship, because the lights would be low, we would have like full concert, like full band, you know. That it's like I always thought that like
School.
especially the emotional
Do you feel like
lyrics, like wow, God saved me. I'm
turned
such a
into more
terrible, evil
conscious?
person. It would make me be so emotional. And then I would confuse that for, oh, the spirit is upon me.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that really kept me reined in. I don't know. I feel like youth, I because my parents stopped going to the church like a year into me being in youth. So whether or not I believed, like, it didn't matter because my best friends were at church and I was going to go regardless. And then by the time I was in youth, I was so involved that there was no way I was going to leave, you know? And I didn't really have, you don't really have time to doubt because we were there. I was doing things with ministry. I was there all the time, you know?
Yeah. So you don't have any memory at any point, because I do. When I was a staff member at a church, you don't remember at least any point where you're in a ministry setting, you specifically in a worship setting where you're like a part of the ministry team, whether you're on staff or not, where you start to question whether this is all real or
Okay,
not.
maybe I forgot. Hold on. Now I'm remembering things. Okay.
So I feel like most people do. If they're honest, I feel like most people do.
The first time it started happening was when I was younger. I would have like a bad day with my parents. And by that, I mean they were mean.
Yeah.
Or I would something and I would pray and absolutely feel nothing. Nothing would change. Nothing would happen. I would cry. I cried myself to sleep so often when I was a kid because my parents treated me like that. And then I would pray and God wouldn't respond. And so my like teachers and stuff at church were telling me like, if God doesn't respond, then it's like you have like a sin in your life that you need to get rid of, basically. So I was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't understand or whatever. So that was the first time I was like, how could I believe in a God who like is quiet to me? Like, I'm a child. I thought God liked children. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And then which I would say is a pretty big red flag. Yeah, that's probably, but, and then the next biggest thing I remember is I would just have this feeling going into youth. Like we would be Sunday morning right before worship talking to all the kids. It's loud. There's music. There's kids. I would be talking to kids. And then all of a sudden I would just be quiet and I would have this emptiness inside me. And my instinct would be like, there is so much more to this. Like I don't even know why I would feel that way. I would just feel it was almost like I got really sad all of a sudden. Like there was so much more to this. And I'd look at these kids and I'd be like, what are we teaching them? Like, what are we doing here? We do so much, but what is it truly that we do? Because it feels like there could be so much more. But then by the time that thought even got out, it was time for me to get on stage, you know? And so I would just truck through that.
Yeah.
And then like inevitably, once we are done with everything that we had to do for ministry, we would get home. I would be so fatigued that it's like I would never revisit that thought until it came again.
Interesting. Never when you guys were playing music, singing songs all about God?
I don't know. I think if I was on stage, which it was frequently, I have a bit of stage fright. So I would try to sing as well as I could, focus on not freaking out.
Okay.
And which I guess is probably totally wrong because we're supposed to be worshiping and leading people in worship. But I kind of had a lot of anxiety that it was really hard. Like I had to really love the song in order to actually get into worship, you know?
Yeah, no,
So-
I get that. I get that for sure.
And
I've been like that a lot with preaching.
Yeah.
You get stuck in
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think actually being in like the congregation, I don't know. I can remember being spaced out a lot, probably thinking about nothing.
Yeah.
But then I would also think about the song like, oh wow, this is a really good song. Or I would think about the music from a musician kind of way.
Yeah.
Like basically judging the way that the pianist is playing, judging the way the guitarist, you know, things you're not supposed to do during worship.
You're a musician. It's hard not to. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. It's so weird because I don't have like honestly, it's the whole like as time went on. I am like I don't know what it was. I don't know why it took so long for my prayers to go unanswered for me to get mad and say that's it. But it really did. It took me like a full 10 years of me praying like that
Yeah. Yeah.
and then God not answering. Because I know that that's inherently the reason why, like, God talks to all these people, so why doesn't he talk to me? You
Hmm.
know, I don't know why it took me so long, but it did.
What do you think changed? I mean,
Mm.
you were in that context for a long time in the Christian world, and
It's
then you
literally,
left for New
yeah,
Age, and then you got slapped in the face.
it was literally every single thing. So every story that I've said, like every small instance, everything that my dad would and my mom, like everything that my dad would do, like he would like use the Bible against us, like tell us, well, these are all the things that you have to do or whatever, but
Yeah.
then ignore the verses about parents behaving a certain way
Yep.
just so that he could do whatever he wanted. And then it obviously, everything that transpired at my church as a whole, especially through the dark age before we left the church permanently. It was just everything piling up on top of each other until literally lockdown. And I was like, that's it. I'm not even going to try. I don't want to try anymore. And nobody, like, it's not like I had the ability to.
Yeah. Fair. Fair. So was it around the time of lockdown that the New Age stuff started?
Um, yeah, I'd say like in like December, January time, and then lockdown in March. So
Okay. So you basically did that all throughout the COVID
yeah.
timeline. So why do you think it happened in February? Like, what do you think there's anything to the timing? Do you think you were just kind of ready? Do you think you needed to
I
play with New Age first?
I think that literally from this past December to January, like what I was just talking about, my like depression and anger and everything had gotten to like 100%, like so bad. Like it
Yeah.
got worst it's ever been. That like I would have these like crazy obsessive thoughts, essentially, that like I didn't trust myself and like I just got to a really bad place that it's like if it went on any longer, I wonder what would have happened. Like I always hated people being well, like this is one of the huge things because I also like partook in so much content about the deconstruction movement and like being an ex-evangelical and like everything. And a
Mm,
huge thing that these people had problems with that I was like, that makes a lot of sense, is the whole like God allowing bad things to happen, being like, see, look, these bad things happen. And so you need me. But like, I have all the authority to take away those bad things. But
yeah.
like, I'm not going to do it because I need you to know you need me. So it's
Yeah.
like a toxic relationship. Like, that's a huge thing that they say. And so I had always been like, yeah, see, that's why I hate it. Like, that's why that was one of the big reasons I was like, yeah, none of this makes sense. This doesn't make sense. But now it's like, what if I had never gone through that new age stuff, if I had never gone through the whole like dark ages of like being exiled from the church, like where would I be? Like what would I still be doing? Being lukewarm? Yeah, okay, that sounds great. So
Yeah.
in a way, I feel like God did allow it to happen just because with him or without him, like back then I was suffering. Like in church, I was like suffering. Without him, I was suffering even more. So it's like in a way that whole thing like you're in this bad position to see how bad you need God. Like it kind of makes sense. Like it's kind of him being like, "Okay, well, you know, you can do your thing for a while, but let's see how this ends up." And then I like almost die, and then God is like, "See? Like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it gets worse." Oh.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Do you feel like so I guess let me preface it. I've talked to a lot of people who are or who have been into the new age stuff. And
Mhm.
a lot of them end up bringing some of it into their Christian walk. And to a point and to a degree, and depending on intentions and how it's practiced, there's not necessarily anything wrong with some of those things. Some of them inherently absolutely don't fit.
Yeah.
Did you do that just out of curiosity, or is there anything like, do you still have crystals in the windowsill? Do you still follow a lunar cycle? Is there anything like that?
There's two things that I do. First of all, the crystal things. I didn't even have to buy any crystals because growing up, I always liked rocks, and my dad would bring me home rocks all the time. So I had a whole collection, and I'm not getting rid of those. Those are like not in my windowsill anymore. They're like in my like closet, but I still have those.
Do you believe in the charging of them and the powers that they have?
No,
There's no wrong answer. I'm not like gotchaing you.
Yeah, like, so it's such a weird feeling because believing all that, it's like I wanted so badly to 100% believe that this was all true, but I was like 99. Like there was an inkling that it's like, there's like, this isn't right. This isn't right. Like I had this intuition, but like, I was like, well, that's stupid. That's just my indoctrination of my past. You know, that's what I would blame it on. Like a lot of the people in the deconstruction movement. But there's two things that I've noticed that I have, and one of them is the moon cycles. And I believe in the moon cycles more purely because it is I don't know. I think just being a woman and how like our natural hormonal cycles kind of follow the moon. Mm-hmm. That, you know, I like that. I like how like there's a piece of me that kind of is in nature as well, like how God designed it. I also I believe in astrology in the way that it's a good way of explaining patterns in the universe. I don't believe in it in a way to tell the future.
Okay.
But those two things aren't really like, I don't know, like those are like whatever to me. The one thing that like I can't really get away from is numerology. So like angel numbers and seeing numbers everywhere and how God can speak through numbers. I'm so on the fence because I don't know at all if it's true or not.
It's but I have true.
Okay,
that's a big biblical thing.
Really? Oh my gosh, okay, that kind of makes me excited. Time. I didn't know it was.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because since February, I have had two massive times where God has been using two sets of specific numbers. One of them he used like in a dream in like the middle of the night for me. And they have been so strong and prominent throughout also my Bible reading too, that I'm just like, this has to be real. But then at the same time, like, it's like, I did just come from believing all this. So what if this is just my like, what if this is me wanting to like twist the Bible a little bit? So I've just been doubting myself and if that's real.
Yeah, no, I get that. And that's good because you should. But no, we put a numerology thing in the Discord under theology, I think, or maybe conspiracy.
Oh, really?
But yeah, because some of the other guys were talking about, Drew's kind of into it too, but God uses numerology all throughout the Bible. And eventually we're going to set something up and have a discussion about it. And I'll teach you guys some stuff, but there is so much numerology within the Bible and in the way that some messages are given, in the meanings of different numbers within different contexts, especially within like some of the prophetic work and especially outside of the canon. So if you get into the Apocrypha, like Enoch and stuff like that, there's a lot. So I think I wouldn't even consider numerology really New Age. The early church was into numerology. They were always dissecting that stuff. So I think that's something
really
you should look into. Yeah, it's super cool. It's very interesting. Okay, so you've got those two things really that and kind of like I was saying in the beginning, you're not doing them in a whoopie doopie context. You're not pulling new age ideologies into it. So I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Trying to think. It's an interesting deal. It's an interesting progression of how that all happened.
Yeah. I know.
Do you think you snapped emotionally over the winter, and that it like broke you down into a vulnerable enough place to allow God in. Is that kind of what you were saying? Or is
I
that
think
off?
so, yeah.
Okay.
That's yeah, it's just I literally hit rock bottom. I
Yeah.
mean, some of the things that I was thinking about, like I like shocked myself now thinking like, wow, how did I ever get to that point, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. For sure. And is there any fear for you that it was an emotional response? I think not, just from the way you've already described the story.
Wait, what do you mean emotional response?
So think about how to say it delicately. I feel like, I guess, kind of go back to some of your experiences as a kid with listening to Christian stories. You hear a lot of these stories like my own, for instance, but there's a lot of people who go through something very traumatic, or end up in prison, or end up dying from an overdose and just coming back, from Narcan or whatever. And like these seem to be the people that become Jesus people. And there's a lot of people that will attribute it to just having this emotional reaction to a traumatic event and then needing something to cling on to. From the way you described it, I think the answer is obviously no. But is that something you've thought about? Because I put myself through the ringer with that personally.
I kind of think about it like, I don't know, I kind of did, but at the same time, like I also came to the conclusion that if it was, I don't know if I really care, because putting a label on it, like whether it's emotional or not, like it happened, and I don't know. The way I feel inside and the way I live my life now is all the evidence that anyone needs to know that like it was real, regardless if it was emotional or not. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. And would you say the feeling though? So the differentiation between conscience and what you felt was the spirit, it's a tangible difference, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was really what took me, is like the number of times I felt what I felt the day that I came back to God was like, I haven't experienced anything that heavy ever again, but I've had a lot of scenarios of like feeling that really intense conscience, quote unquote, that I believe is the spirit. And I feel like I can very distinctly tell the difference between when something is my conscience and I'm just like, no, that's not the right thing, or when I feel like I'm being told to do or not to do something.
Yeah. Same. I think like the biggest deciding factor is if something is very deeply emotional like that, I will cry. I don't really, it takes a lot for me to cry, but like at church or something, if the worship was just really emotional, like I would cry.
Yeah.
And whenever all this happened, like with God, like every single time that I have, oh my gosh, I hate using this word, having an experience or encounter with the spirit, whatever. Every time I would have that scenario, like I would never cry. I would literally just start shaking. Like I was just like pumped with adrenaline. Like, and that's how I knew like it was like, I don't know. I know it's the spirit because he's deliberately telling me these things. And like, I don't feel emotional. Like I'm not going to cry. I'm not scared. I'm not whatever. It's just, I know. Like the times that I've cried recently is like, if there's a worship song I really like, or like how we were talking about it, like The Chosen, the first episode. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was a wreck. Like, but other than that, like that, I feel like that's how I know it's not like emotional.
Yeah, I get that. There's a confidence to it for sure. Okay. Interesting. Trying to think. I all my questions you've answered. It's really interesting.
Do you know what I've been thinking about? So, it was literally like right around the time that I left the church. So I watched Good Mythical Morning all the time, and Rhett and Link. Wait, you know what that is, right?
No, I'll look it up though.
So, okay. So Good Mythical Morning is like, they're YouTubers. Like it's like a whole thing. Like it's like a morning. It's silly. It's a cool show that these two guys do, whatever. But they used to be like a part of the evangelical church, and then they went on deconstruction, except they never like returned to the faith. They like don't believe in God or like Jesus really. But like there's always like they talk about their deconstruction stories. They talk about like their spiritual walks, what they're thinking, what they're doing now. And a huge thing that one of them brought up is like religion is basically somebody taking like a fundamental like idea and then tying their emotional experience or their own perceived lens like of that idea. And like I keep thinking about that because like I think it was like today or yesterday or something like that, they posted a podcast and I listened to it, and it was essentially about like if they believed in demons and stuff, and they kind of like touched on that topic. And I just I don't know, I want to know what you think about that, like about calling something like believing in the spirit an idea, like the Holy Spirit, Christianity is an idea, but it's real to us because we have this experience with it. And like, I obviously know for sure that it's like objective, it is truth, but like, how did they not come back to the spirit like I did if they're always searching like I was? Like, I had this whole experience with the spirit. But that's not what makes it real. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, your experience with God doesn't make God real. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways to kind of go at this, but if you think about the origin of life, God obviously existed before anything else, and the argument is that God has always existed, and that's what makes him super natural. Everything else in the natural world can be explained on a timeline within time itself and has some kind of origin point. So the atheists will take you to the Big Bang. They have no answer for that because it goes against science in and of itself. Something happening that wasn't caused to happen by something else goes against science. So the Christian answer to that is what we have, that's God. So if you want to believe in the Big Bang as a Christian, people do, and it's cohesive because God could have caused that. And then the creation story in Genesis is just kind of a poetic example of what nature is, what the origin story was like, but it actually happened Big Bang style. And then you have the other Christians who believe Genesis is literal and all that. But God is outside of space, he's outside of time, so he's always existed. Our experiences say nothing about who he is. They say nothing about whether he's there or not. So the same would be said about like experiences with the spirit. I believe every human has the ability to experience that, but I don't believe everybody has the heart to. But that doesn't mean it's not always there. I feel like even those guys, I mean, some people leave, man, and they still search their entire lives, but they're so hardened to it. Or, I mean, think about like atheists, because atheists aren't just people who don't believe in God. That's like agnostic. Atheists are people who like are vehemently opposed to the idea of God. They've become hardened, and they still dedicate much of their life to God, which is ironic and kind of, I've always thought it to be kind of funny. You don't believe in God, but you run a YouTube channel and spend all your time talking about how God isn't real. You're like oddly connected to God, but it's like this, it's like out of spite almost.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of people like that. And whether the spite is there or not, whether it's Gnosticism or it's atheism, these people all have the ability to connect, but they've been hardened over something. And I think that says something about our experience more than what they were talking about. I think your experiences sometimes are what keep you away from touching what is right there the entire time. In a lot of people's case. I didn't believe in it for a long time, and I was an atheist for a long time, the type that would talk crap about Christians pretty hard. But there was something in me the whole time that like understood there was something there. I just didn't know what it was.
I just keep thinking like what? Because what about like ministry or like, I mean, goodness, this could just be like my evangelical background, but literally evangelizing, like telling people about the Holy Spirit, telling people about God. Like, it's like, that's like a knowledge that we give, but like for them to believe, don't they need like an experience? Because I had all the knowledge, but I didn't actually have it. I didn't actually believe until like I had the Holy Spirit, which is like my experience. Does that make sense? Like, it's like, how is that supposed to work? Like, we can't give people an experience.
No, but I don't I guess I don't agree. I don't think you need to have an experience to get saved. I didn't. I had some emotional events and whatnot, but I don't feel like I was saved the night that I realized I was broken, and I realized that I was living immorally, and I had an experience, but it wasn't with God at the time. I had an experience where I consciously, for the first time, really understood that I was an immoral person, and I had no idea why. So my experience in the moment, at least, had nothing to do with God. I didn't feel like God. It didn't feel like the Holy Spirit. I didn't think about God. I just knew that what I was doing was wrong. I just knew that I was a bad person. I realized that all of these events that led me to where I was were awful. And I had never really felt that before. And that's what set me on like a several year journey of researching. And I came to a logical conclusion. And then once I came to the logical conclusion that of all these religions I've researched, of all these years I've spent reading and reading and reading and reading and reading, Christianity makes the most sense. And I logically also understood what we have from Christianity is not perfect. It's been picked through, it's been broken, the stuff I talk about all the time. But it's the best we have. It's the best we have. And then the more I submit to that, the more I believed that, the more I tried to give myself over to that intellectual conclusion, then I started having experiences. And then from then I was sold. That's when I became sold. But I had that moment years prior where I was just, obviously it was God, but intellectually, logically, I had no idea it was God. I just like had this sinking pit inside of me where I realized I was a bad person in a whole bunch of different ways. So I think people experience it very differently because I think a lot of people are very different. I think it's just like that's like the classic kind of stereotypical Christian experience is like you're washed with the Holy Spirit and you feel God's presence and then you come. And I experienced that way later, but I agreed and like made a conscious choice to live as a Christian before I had that. And then later when I started realizing that, I did realize then years prior what I felt was God. But in the moment I had no idea. So I don't know. I think it's different for different people. I think everybody can kind of experience that differently. But I'm very, very critical. Like you know how I am. Critical thinking.
Yeah.
Like that's that's my whole game. So I think there's other people who are like that, and they need an intellectual experience rather than like an emotional experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think everybody's different. So I think like obviously probably women are more geared towards the emotional, men more not, but there's obviously going to be a lot of men who need the emotional and a lot of women who need the intellectual. But I think it varies. I really do. I think God kind of works with people where they are.
Yeah, I really do lean on like it just extremely varies person to person because that makes sense. Just because all my life I've been told nothing but like I'm a really bad person. I live bad, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a good question though. That's a hard question, really. Sweet. Well, take care of your brain. Don't overthink.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll try. I don't know.
Try to go through your lukewarm notes without losing your mind.
Yeah.
And organize them best you can. And then just send them to me whenever you can. And
okay.
We'll do it. Tomorrow should be good. Should be interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Cool.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you coming around to tell the story. It was good.
No, it was.
All right, man. I will. Well, I'll talk to you.
Okay, cool.
All right. Later.
Bye.